Start streaming klik. Eens even kijken hoor. FPS ziet er soepel uit. Hij heeft een verbinding. Hey. Wacht. Alright. Welcome everybody to the OWASP Netherlands chapter virtual meetup of April 2023. Again, a virtual meetup. The last one was in March in Amsterdam, a physical meeting, and the next one will be as well. But first, on to today. We have the agenda, the chapter updates, okay, what I'm giving you now. And after that will be to talk about the rise of the security verification standard by Grossman. There's a short break, after which we will continue with the OWASP Juice Shop by Björn Kimminich. And of course after that some feedback is appreciated, and we'll close the session. If you do have any questions during the presentations, just put them in the chat and we'll answer them at the end of the talk. I can moderate the chat, so well, let's see, you can expect a swift reply from me and a reply within the presentation later on. Our next meetup is in May. We usually have the third Thursday of each month. This time that was Ascension Day, so basically we decided to move it up 1 week, and it will be instead on the 25th of May. A physical meeting in Delft, the Netherlands. Exact details can be found on owasp.nl, as well as our meetup and LinkedIn pages. And it will be by two speakers, the EPSEC in IT contracts with Sebastian Avavari, and Containers Enter Escapes, Understanding Escape Patterns and Possibilities with Mauricio Keno. But first, for today is, and of course, what security topics would you like to hear in our future meetings? We have a lineup for May, but we're still looking for interesting topics for June, September, October, and of course next year. And on menti.com, with the access code displayed in the screen, or by simply scanning the QR code, you can reply to a poll and give us some topics, and perhaps your topic will be in the next meetup. So, on to today, I guess. And the first presentation is from Josh Grossman. Josh, if you could share your screen. Yep, we see it now. Okay, Josh Grossman about the rise of the security verification standard. Josh, the floor is yours.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, thanks very much. And yeah, thanks very much for having me on the chapter meetup today. Really, always great fun going to different OWASP chapters and speaking at different OWASP chapters, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person, especially topics when I'm passionate about them. And this is certainly something that I'm particularly passionate about. And yeah, hopefully it'll be a useful update and useful insight for people into the OWASP application security verification standard project and sort of where we are with that and what we're seeing at the moment. So before I dive into that, a little bit about myself. My name is Josh Grossman. My day job, I work as an application security consultant for a company here in Israel called Bounce Security, sort of a boutique application security consultancy. Working with lots of different clients locally, overseas, seeing lots of different environments, lots of different application security challenges, and I also deliver talks and training around the world on that topic as well. In my spare time, I also very involved with OWASP. I am on a local chapter board here for OWASP Israel, and I've also been involved with various other projects. I had a very small amount of involvement in the Juice Shop project a while ago as well, which was good fun. But yeah, the main reason I'm here today is because I'm a co-leader of the Application Security Verification Standard. And yeah, I put some pictures up there as well for what I do in my actual spare time. So that's me. So what do I want to talk about today? So I want to give a brief background to the ASVS and talk a little bit about what it is, how it fits into the overall context of OWASP, and yeah, just sort of understanding, okay, what are we talking about here? I'm not going to go into too much detail. I will provide some other resources for it, but I do want to give an update on sort of where we are at the moment and what our plans are for the next upcoming version that we're trying to work towards. And I also want to talk a little bit about sort of how we're seeing ASVS used in industry and sort of some of the initiatives we're seeing, because I think it is useful to sort of understand where we are with that, and also how you can be involved and how you can help out with this overall direction as well. So the eternal question, what is the ASVS? Certainly the first question a lot of people ask when they come into this sort of presentation. So I like to talk about the ASVS, and I like to say, well, first, what isn't the ASVS? What's the ASVS not? So we're here at an OWASP meetup. I presume everyone's heard of the OWASP top 10 risks. Even when I'm not at OWASP events, people have usually heard of the top 10 risks. So the top 10 risks is this great project. It's released every few years. Got really sort of high profile, very experienced leaders who bring together 10 issues in application security. Certainly the most recent versions, 2017, 2021, had a lot of input from the wider community and public comments. And it's very, very frequently cited. It comes up in all sorts of different contexts where they want to talk about application security. And it's effectively a very, very good application security awareness document. And that's the key thing here, because the OWASP top 10 risks is an awareness document. This isn't controversial. This is something that the project leaders are very clear about. It's a document for raising awareness about application security. It's about saying, look, there are these problems in application security. There are these things that we need to think about, these things we need to address. But it's not a standard. It's not designed to be a standard. It's not designed to be assessed against. Organizations like PCI have historically said you've got to comply with the OWASP top 10, which is not at all what the OWASP top 10 is for. It's effectively 10 things, and sometimes those things are one thing, sometimes those things are lots of things, and it's not everything. Again, it's just a top 10. It's just a selection of them. And one of the things that I find a little bit challenging about it as well is it's bringing a bunch of problems. It's saying, look, here are a bunch of problems you need to think about. Here are a bunch of problems you need to solve somehow. Especially when I'm working with developers, I find that it's not an ideal way of helping sort of build secure software by saying, look, here are a bunch of problems. Now what are you going to do? So there's another project, which is lesser known, but still really great, called the OWASP Top 10 Proactive Controls. So this is a guidance document for sort of building secure software. And this time it's focused on developers and builders. And it's basically giving a list of 10 sort of good practices to take into account and to apply when you're building a piece of software. What do you want to do? What do you want to do right when you're building a piece of software? What security controls should you have in place? So this is a great starting point. It's also got a really great team of experienced leaders who prepared the document, got a fair amount of public feedback as well, and came up with this document of practical guidance. Here's what you should do for security when you're building an application. Problems are that it's still not 100% comprehensive. It's still not all-encompassing. It's still not, okay, here's everything you think about. Again, it's more of a starting point. It's more the sort of document where I say to developers who are just starting out, sort of thinking about security here, look through this, because this will give you sort of a vague overview of some key security thoughts and some key security topics and things to think about. But it's a starting point. And again, it's more for awareness. And again, it's not organized like a standard. It's not something you can comply with. It's not something you can say, okay, well, yes, we now comply with the proactive controls. It's a nice document, but it's not comprehensive and it's not a standard. So that brings us to the eternal question of what you're going to do. What are we going to do? We want to help developers build software securely. Certainly in my day job, that's the aim of the game. I want to work with development teams. I want to work with development organizations. I want to find ways that they can build software securely within their organizations and find ways that they can assess, okay, how are we doing from a software security perspective? So what's the answer? Unsurprisingly, as we're here, the answer, I think, is the OWASP ASVS, the Application Security Verification Standard Project. So, what is the ASVS? So the ASVS is a set of requirements for a secure application. So the idea is we give a list of requirements saying, look, these are the things that you need to take into account. These are the considerations you need to take into account when you're building a piece of software, when you're building an application. And we very specifically structure it to be like a standard. It's something you can work through line by line and think, okay, am I doing this correctly? Am I doing that correctly? Am I complying with this? We try and make it leading practices, which means that, when we released version 4 in 2019, we knew it would be a few years until we were able to release the next version. So we wanted to make sure that the controls and the requirements and the considerations that we include in the standard are going to be useful for today, but also for tomorrow, for next month, for next year, and already looking at things that will be useful going forward. So for example, when we talk about cookie attributes in the standard, there's a particular requirement in the standard that talks about a cookie attribute that was a quite early stage, not really known about, just a property of cookies that if you named them in a particular way, it would make the cookie more secure. It tell the browser to treat the cookie more securely. Now, when we wrote version 4 back in 2019, this was sort of an early stage draft, but we could see the browser vendors had adopted it and they were using it. And it was just sort of going through the formalization process. We could see, look, this is something that is useful now. It'll be useful in the future. It may be early stage, but it's still going to be useful. So we put it in. We had that there as something that has now sort of gone through a more formalized process, but ultimately it's supported by the browsers and it gives a nice level of security, so we wanted to include it. So it's a good example of making sure that we're thinking about what's relevant today, what's relevant in the future. So since sort of the early stages of preparing version 4, the standard has been developed in the open in GitHub, so everyone can see what's going on, everyone can be involved in discussions, everyone can provide their suggestions, and that's very, very important from our perspective. I'm lucky to share with a very sort of well-experienced and knowledgeable set of co-leaders. Each of whom has their own strengths, each of whom has their own depth of experience, but we want to get a wider level of experience as well. We want to get wider input as well. We want to get input from the wider community, and having it in GitHub allows us to do that. It means that we can get feedback from all sorts of different corners, all sorts of different people in different organizations. And that's what happens. We've got a lot of open issues there, a lot of things to think about in the context of the standard, and that's great. It means it's more applicable for the wider industry. Now, the ASVS is quite large. The ASVS version 4 has about 280 requirements, and that's a lot to do. That's obviously a lot to think about. It's not really something we can eat all in one go. It's not really something you can take in one bite. So we have a level system whereby we try and introduce teams, organizations in slightly more gradually to make it easier to start off using the ASVS. So version 4 has 3 levels. We've got the standard level, we've got the minimum level, which is level 1, which is sort of the basic level of security we'd like organizations to get to as a starting point. It's not really enough for sensitive data and sensitive operations, but it's certainly a good starting point. It's certainly where we see as the most important things to start with. So that's level 1, the minimum level. There are still about 130 requirements in there, but hopefully a lot of them are already being done. And most importantly, and sort of usefully for the verification side, all of those level 1 requirements should be testable using sort of the standard sort of application penetration testing approach. Whether they are all checked for, that's a different question. We'll talk more about that later on. But in principle, they should be testable from the outside. Level 2 is what we call the standard level. This is where we say, look, this is where applications should strive to get to. This is where we want to try and aim ourselves. Now, these requirements tend to be a little bit more in-depth and a little bit more difficult to achieve. You might need to ask, if you're an external tester or an external assessor, you might need to start asking the developers questions. You might need to start looking at the application architecture. You might need to start reviewing some code just to understand exactly what is going on behind the scenes and whether they're really complying with what you're supposed to be complying with. But it's certainly, that's the level we think that most applications should be striving to get to. It's still about another 130 requirements, but they're already a little bit more involved, but they're also bringing a lot more value in terms of the security protections they provide. And finally, there's level 3. Level 3 is the sort of the advanced level, the maximum security level. And we say, well, if you've got an application that's particularly sensitive, it's storing very sensitive data, it's performing very high value transactions, that's where you might want to start thinking about level 3. And level 3 brings in about another 20 or so controls, 20 or so requirements, but they tend to be a little bit more involved, a little bit more complicated. And again, designed for sort of the highest levels of assurance. So for version 4, that's how we try to make it a little bit easier to go in. It's still quite a large learning curve, but it's obviously a tricky balance when we're trying to build something that is comprehensive and is going to lead to a decent level of security. So I'm not going to talk much more about the latest version. The latest version is 4.0.3. I've got talks online where I've spoken about those in more detail. I think that it can be useful to go through that information and understand a little bit more in depth as to how 403 is made up and the sort of requirements that are in there, and a little bit more about some of the details about how it looks. But yeah, you can scan that code if you want to see a previous talk, or go to that URL if you want to see a previous talk, and I'll go into a lot more detail about 403. But today I want to talk a little bit more about how we're seeing the ASVS used, and sort of also our vision for the use of ASVS. So when we talk about the ASVS, the idea is to be relatively widely applicable and be sort of usable from a number of different use cases. And again, because I sort of bias towards working with developers and helping them build securely, I often end up talking about the first few bullets here. How we can use the ASVS to develop secure requirements at the requirement stage of development. How we can use it maybe during a design review as a checklist to say, look, have we got this included in the design? Are we taking this into account in the design? Maybe use guidelines whilst you're implementing. Okay, well, which algorithm should we use for this? Which mechanism should we use for this? Where can we refer to discover this? Or even just saying, look, we want to put this security mechanism in place. We want to put this additional security control. I don't know, maybe it's an appliance, maybe it's a security software package or something. Maybe it's a security service we're using in the cloud, our cloud environment. Okay, so which of the ASVS requirements is it helping us to address? Just to understand, okay, what value is it bringing us? But one of the key uses, which is kind of hinted at by the name, is use as a verification standard. The application security verification standard, it's in the name. And I think it's something that maybe it's not used as much as it should be at the moment. And we're looking to see how we can address that. So I'm not talking about this sort of verification, but rather, verifying the security of an application. We've got an application. We want to figure out, okay, what is the level of security within this application? How well is it covering common security requirements, protecting against common attacks? So what do we usually do? We usually do penetration testing. Now, back in 2011, this is 12 years ago almost, there was this presentation at 44Con that someone reminded me of actually just this week in a different context. And they pointed out to me that someone else, Rory McCoon, also did a very similar presentation, I think earlier in that same year. In 2011, people were saying, look, penetration testing has got problems. It doesn't work great. It's not an ideal solution. But that's what everyone's doing. That's what everyone has continued to do. When it comes to security verification of applications, that seems to be one of the primary controls that people use, one of the primary activities that people put into place. Now, one of the key problems of penetration testing is that, as Haroon said, it's a market for lemons. What does that mean? It means that if you are someone who buys penetration tests, you're an organization that needs to receive penetration testing services. If you look at a company and think, well, how good are they? How not good are they? You don't really have any way of knowing. You don't really have any way of knowing how good is this company at doing penetration testing? How good is the actual tester going to be? The company themselves know how good they are, in the same way that a used car salesman who's trying to sell a car that they know is under the hood, it's been really battered and it's not been looked after. They know that, but the person who's looking at it from the outside can't tell that. That's where the the market for lemons concept comes in the first place. The idea that the seller knows whether it's good or not, but the buyer has no idea and no way of finding out. And overall, this leads to, because the buyer can't assess, okay, well, how good is this test? How well are they going to do this test for me? How sophisticated are they? It just leads to this trend of, well, if buyers can't tell the difference anyway, then sellers just start selling bad services by default, and they start undercutting, and they start reducing prices and reducing quality. And this is what I see. I see multiple people in the industry coming to me saying, look, why are penetration testing reports so bad? Why is the quality so bad? I mean, I literally looked at one this week. Someone sent me one as part of a training course that I was working on. I was delivering them a training course and asked them to send me some sample findings, and there's a grammar mistake in the title of the finding. I was like, there's a grammar mistake in the title of the finding. What does the rest of the finding look like? And this is the trend we're seeing, and this is the direction we're seeing, where the overall quality of security, AppSec verification, penetration testing is just diving through the floor, and that's being widely acknowledged in lots of different forums, and it was being acknowledged as a problem, as an issue in 2011. So we can do better. We can do better penetration testing. We can get better at this. And I actually gave a talk on this 2018, it must have been now, AppSec USA and a couple of other locations as well, saying, look, we can do better application security penetration testing. You as a buyer can demand more, ask for more, be more pushy, get more value out of the process. What I came up against when I was trying to actually take this into account in industry was that the industry overall was still sort of making this downward spiral towards lower quality. People didn't want to pay extra to get higher value because, well, this person will do it for like 2/3 of the price or half the price, so why don't I just go with them? So one of the ways they tried to solve this for sort of regular network penetration testing was by creating the penetration testing execution standard back a long time ago. This is something that was suggested for 2011. This is more of a network penetration testing guide, and the whole concept was the same. Have a fixed methodology for doing this. Have a standardized way of doing this that all testers should be using, an approach that all testers should be using, and a way that you can enforce some consistency, some comparability, and a better quality of end product. So if that's for network security, what can we do about application security? What could help us provide a standard for verifying application security? Unsurprisingly, the OWASP ASPS. And we think this is in a great position to do this. This is a great standard that can be used to actually say, okay, well, this is what we're assessing against. This is what we're verifying the application against. Something like the Web Security Testing Guide, another OWASP project, which is a great sort of how-to for how to perform security testing. And that's great for the sort of the how-to aspect. But the nice thing about the ASPS is it sort of gives this requirement-led methodology, this requirement-led set of tasks, set of things to look for that the developers can be working from and the tester can be working from as well. So we want to get the application security verification standard used more in this sort of context. But we'd have some sort of challenges there from an OWASP perspective. So first of all, how can OWASP remain neutral? OWASP is not supposed to be super opinionated about how you should do things or which organizations you should use. So OWASP needs to sort of remain as neutral. We're going to say, look, this is what we see as secure. This is the guidance that we see as being good guidance for security. But how you apply that and the context, we need to sort of have a little bit of distance from. We also need to think how to drive adoption of the standard. Where can we build demand for this? How can we make sure that organizations are seeing the value of this and are actively asking for it? And then how do we know that the tester is competent to do this sort of thing? This is a little bit removed from regular application penetration testing. Suddenly doing a test verifying using the application security verification standard, there's a lot more going on. It's a lot more complicated there. And the tester needs to have a slightly wider view than just, here, I'm going to break this web app. So I want to talk about a couple of initiatives that we've seen. It's important to be clear. I'm providing these initiatives as an update. I'm giving them as information. We're not advocating these initiatives. We're not saying, go do this. We're not saying, again, OWASP and the ASPS team remain neutral, but we do think it's important that the industry is aware of what is going on and what sort of initiatives there are out there. So the first initiative I wanted to highlight is the CREST OVS program, the OWASP verification standard. And the idea is to take ASVS and also MASVS and layer on top of that a standard for actually performing the assessments. And that's sort of an area where the OWASP and the ASVS team don't really want to get into. How do you perform a test? How do you report on that? It's not really what we're doing. We're trying to provide a security guidance, but CREST are then stepping in and say, look, we want to build this program around that for how you should perform that assessment. And the intention is that this sort of test should go over and above what a penetration test would normally do, but also result in some sort of standardized and comparable reporting format and then can be compared across different applications or across different organizations, instead of sort of the haphazard reporting that comes from penetration testing process. CREST have committed to donating revenue back to OWASP as sort of a thanks for using the standard, which I think is a nice move from their perspective. So it was announced last summer and they're working on it. You can see more information at this link. And from OWASP's perspective, it's quite useful because we get this sort of arm's length thing where we can say, look, we've defined what the ASVS is, the MASVS team have defined what the MASVS is, and then CREST will handle the way the overall program in the way they want to do it. And they consult with us, but it's not our thing. We remain at arm's length from it. And that's where we want to be. We want to be in a position to define the standard and say, look, this is the security requirements we think are important. This is the way we think you should be doing it. This is the security requirements we think that an organization and application should have in place. Let CREST worry about the overall program itself and how to do the assessments and how to handle everything else. So CREST have a lot of experience in driving adoption and actually getting this adopted in industry. So I think that's a good boost for awareness and adoption of the ASVS. They also have experience in accrediting testers. It's something that they do day to day. So this is sort of a nice initiative that we're seeing that's basing on the ASVS. This is CREST initiative currently, but taking the ASVS and say, okay, well, let's take this to industry. Let's actually use this in industry. The other initiative I wanted to call out is the App Defense Alliance, which is another initiative which through Google sort of oversees quite a large ecosystem of applications. There are other organizations involved as well. The idea is that all applications within the ecosystem will go through some sort of assessment that is in some way based on ASVS and MASVS. And they've got various different ways of sort of slicing and dicing that depending on the impact of the application. Because they also have a scalability problem. They want to be able to cover a large swathe of different applications. So that's the URL if you want to see more information. They've got a few programs. They've got a mobile program. They've got a sort of cloud program, which is more about sort of classic web applications. And in this case, again, we're defining the ASVS. The App Defense Alliance defines how they're going to use it. Now, that means that industry has to look at the App Defense Alliance and the way they're using it and make sure they feel comfortable with that, make sure it makes sense. But again, if organizations, members of industry who are involved in large ecosystems of applications can drive this adoption, then it's an important step in saying, look, we want to have a more consistent way of verifying security of applications in the industry. And if they say, look, in order to ride this ride, in order to be part of this ecosystem, you need to comply with this requirements, and that's going to lift the overall position of the ecosystem. It's going to increase the overall security level of all applications, because as soon as you want to start working in this ecosystem, as soon as you want to start using Google's APIs or being in the Play Store, you're going to have to comply with these requirements. So it's certainly a big benefit for adoption of the standard as well. The tester question is a little bit more of an open question. Google's got their own views and in terms of how that's going to work within the App Defense Alliance. But again, it's a very interesting initiative that's saying, look, we're going to take the ASVS and we're going to take the MASVS, we're going to do something with this. So that's useful from an OWASP perspective for pushing the ASVS forward. Google have also provided a donation to the ASVS project, which is certainly very, very good of them as well and important for support. We'll talk about that more afterwards as well. So what other challenges do we have? What else do we need to think about from the ASVS perspective? So the other key challenges that we've identified at the moment are the usability, the scope, and the scalability. And here's what we want to do. So for usability, we've got version 5 coming up. And usability, we want to be one of the key sort of goals of version 5 of ASPS. We want the standard to be even more usable than it is today, even easier to start working with, even easier to understand. In terms of the scope of the standard, there's a lot of open discussion about that at the moment. Historically, it was a lot easier to say what an application is. Nowadays, that's a little bit more complicated because now we have CI/CD systems and we have vulnerabilities in those CI/CD systems and we have software supply chain issues and we have sort of cloud infrastructure that's sort of on the border. So there are a lot of discussions and issues going on about what exactly is the scope of ASPS. We are trying to keep it to focus on the application elements and leave room for other groups, for other projects within OWASP to sort of look at the other areas as well. So there's already a supply chain verification standard that looks at the more the software provenance and how it's being brought into the application. So there's already a verification standard about that, and maybe we see other ones as well. We want to focus on our core area, but certainly if you've got opinions, come into the GitHub issues, open GitHub issues, ask questions, and let us know what you think. Scalability is also a challenge. I think by making it more usable, then scalability will get easier, and it'll be easier to start using this for multiple applications. There's a wider question there about automation and, in general, how do we apply this across a large ecosystem that we're still thinking about. And it may be that once we come to version 5, we can look at what areas are easier to automate compared to others. So overall for version 5, we've got a few key principles. We've already started working on this. If you look into the GitHub repository today, you'll see that there is the stable branch, which is the 403 branch, and there's also the 4.0 directory in the GitHub repository. And then we've also got our main branch, our master branch, which is within the 5.0 folder there. We're actively working on modifying what's already there, making changes, and trying to strive towards these goals and also get through our issue backlog. So the key goals, looking at the existing requirements and trying to clarify them, make sure that they make sense, that they're understandable. A lot of them have carried over from a few SPS versions, and maybe the world has changed slightly, maybe our understanding of how things work has changed slightly. So we're actively seeing ways of clarifying that and making it clearer. There's also the fact that we want to make it more accessible for developers. We want to make it easier for someone who's not got not a full-time security specialist, not deeply embedded in that world. We'd like to make it easier for them to look at the requirements and say, all right, this is what we need to do here. This is the mechanism we need to put into place here. So that's a key goal. And obviously, we're also adding a bunch of requirements as well. We've got lots of different people who are opening issues saying, what about this type of issue? What about that type of issue? And each time we've got to think, is that covered by an existing requirement? Do we need a new requirement for that? Or is it maybe just an existing requirement needs to be clarified to cover that? And that's certainly leading some interesting discussions in the GitHub issues, especially around questions such as, what do we sanitize for? What do we input validate for? What sort of attacks are all going to be covered by a similar requirement we can just put in as one requirement? So we don't have to have one line for every new requirement. So next thing is about the levels. I gave an explanation of levels 1, 2, and 3 beforehand. We'd like to make it even clearer. We'd like to make it even easier, and maybe even reduce the barrier to entry. And needs to be a difficult discussion there about balancing between mandating that application is secure, but also making achievable goals. And the reason why there's 130 requirements just in the minimum levels because we feel like we can't go less than that. We can't allow organizations to miss this out and still say they're complying with the level of their SPS as a version 4. In version 5, we need to have another think about that and think about whether we need to lower the barrier to entry, have some sort of easier level just to provide that sort of easier stepping stone to get into the overall process. There are a whole lot of mappings in the document. We want to try and clean that up. We may move some mappings off the face of the main document to try and make the document a little bit clearer and maybe streamline the main document as well. I think there's some useful information there, but there's a lot of text. And I think that a lot of organizations aren't necessarily looking at the supporting text. They're looking at the requirements themselves. And I think maybe we need to look through that and clarify a little bit about what's really the important text here. What do we want to keep and what can we move to an appendices or what can we move out of the way so we're not clouding the view of the overall standard. So that's the overall sort of goal and vision for version 5, and that's really what we're working towards. And that's really the theme of issues that we're looking to see and looking to address at the moment in the GitHub repository as we work towards that. So I've got a few calls for action here. Ways you can help, ways you can be prepare for this. Look, based on the initiatives we're seeing at the moment, I think we can expect that testing around ASVS and MASVS is likely to become a lot more commonplace, a lot more, we're going to see this a lot more in terms of how organizations are performing assessments, how organizations are requesting assessments, how regulators are expecting that assessments will be performed. And I think we need to be going into this sort of direction. You know, the whole point of having these documents there is to provide you something you can use to say, well, how are we doing from a security perspective, and can someone external verify that? So if you're an application penetration tester, can you start using the ASVS for your testing? I've already spoken to various penetration testing organizations that are doing this and are looking at using this as a basis for their work and using this as the basis for their methodology, because they can see that it gives them that sort of clear language they can use to articulate what they're doing and also provide guidance to developers. And from an application developer perspective, if you're working in an application development team or you're working in a security team that's securing an application, can you structure your control documentation and the way that you talk about security around the ASVS as well? If you can use this as the guidance for your developers to say, look, this is how you need to build this in, this is how you need to implement your security controls. And when they come to assessment, it's going to be a lot easier to comply with the assessment because you've already documented it in that way. You've already documented it using that structure. So I'd certainly say it's important to start moving towards that now. Like I said, I've got a great team of co-leaders, very experienced. Without these folks, this just wouldn't happen. But it also wouldn't happen without a large group of contributors in the GitHub repository and asking questions in the Slack channel as well. And you can be there as well. You can help with that as well. You can provide your comments, you can provide your guidance, you can provide your ideas. So yeah, go to the GitHub repository, submit issues if you can't find them through the search. A lot of time issues have been brought up already, so search to see whether it was already discussed. Submit your general feedback, comment on other people's issues. Don't just open new issues. Give your opinion on other people's issues. Sometimes someone will open an issue and I'm thinking, well, I think this, and maybe another leader thinks that, but what does everyone else think? What does the rest of the industry think? And there are certainly issues in the GitHub repository that are marked as community wanted, community needed. So if you've got time to look at those issues and give your opinions and help us sort of decide, which direction we're going to go with these questions. There's some URLs you can use to access that and also see our contribution guide as well. So the final call to action is tough. It's a difficult subject, but I think more and more we're seeing this model in industry. We're seeing this model where a huge amount of reliance and a huge amount of work is relying on a very small amount of people or a small amount of available effort. Right now, we've got a lot of work to do for maintaining the standard, for addressing issues in the repository and trying to push towards version 5. And each issue that gets opened, we're talking about half an hour, several hours of investigation, thinking about, well, how are we going to address that? What's the best way? Looking back through the history, thinking about how we get consensus. There's a lot of work that goes into it. And we're definitely looking to try and push this forward and accelerate it. But at the same time, this is a group of volunteers doing this in our spare time. So we're lucky to have a few supporters. We've got various employers who act as maintaining supporters because they allow us to do some of this on employer time. So thank you to Clarified Security, to Bounce Security, and to Manacode, who are the employers of some of the leaders who, again, we get to spend some of our time at the employer working on this project, which effectively means this employer, employers are funding the project to a certain extent. Like I said, we also had a great contribution from Google and also from OneConsult, Apiro, and Crest gave contributions as well. But certainly, we're looking to other organizations who can support the standard and help us push it forward. If we could get a group of organizations to put a little bit more together so that we can really accelerate and jumpstart version 5, I think it'd be a really fantastic move for the industry and give us a really strong standard to base on. So in summary, get ready for verification, expect assessments to go this way, start expecting assessments to be this way, start trying to make sure that, okay, if you're assessing using a particular standard, if you're building a control environment for an application, are you building it according to that standard? And then, help with version 5.0, be that in GitHub issues and providing input, or be that working, if your employer can provide financial support through our OWASP, that's going to be a big benefit for the project, and also certainly prestigious for your employer as well. So if you're a large organization that want to fund us, that would be fantastic, because I think this is a great way of pushing the overall security level of the industry forward. So if you want to carry on, continue the discussion, go to the GitHub repository. You can also reach out to me on Twitter. That's a good way of getting hold of me. If you've got specific questions, I'll put the rest of my contact details up at the end. And then just one more thing, Tim Cook style, sorry, Steve Jobs style. Any of you feel like some May sunshine? We've got the AppSec Israel conference coming up in a few weeks' time in Tel Aviv. So tell your friends, tell your employers, and it'd be great to see you in and out here. It's going to be a great event. Tickets are on sale now. Sponsorship is available, and yeah, we're hoping for a really great event in a few years post since COVID. So yeah, this is our first proper year back. So yeah, if you can make it, it'd be great to see you. But for now, that has been me. You can get contact with me. You can get in contact with the ASVS project overall. If you've got any questions, I think if you put them into the chat, I think they might be able to read them out. But otherwise, feel free to reach out. And yeah, thank you very much for your time. And yeah, please be involved and be in contact.
All right, Josh, thank you for this presentation on the Application Security Verification Standard. Meanwhile, in the chat, one question has already appeared. Valentine Scholten asks, are there any software tools that facilitate performing a verification session on a project or application to record the results, not to verify the actual requirements?
Is that, as you say, an automated tool for performing an assessment?
To facilitate performing, so to record the results.
To record the results. So I think maybe Daniel Cuthbert and the Santander team had a sort of application you can use to sort of stand up this application and say, okay, well, we're complying with this requirement, we're not complying with that requirement, just a sort of a reporting mechanism. So I think Daniel Cuthbert and the Santander team has something along those lines. I don't remember that. Don't remember exactly off the top of my head. I don't know whether SKF allows to demonstrate to record in that format as well, but certainly I know that the Santander had something, I think. I wonder if I can find it.
Okay, regarding the security knowledge framework, I heard you mention the SKF. Indeed, it helps you shift through the requirements to list only those that are applicable to your application. Of course, that provides a more comprehensive list of results, and for that, a more comprehensive list to process. Other things that might come in handy, but not necessarily to record whatever has been verified as being well done, is of course our defect dojo project, and similars are also available. I've seen a next question from Nariman Agatagiev, and I hope I pronounced the name right. For a team that is looking into improving their security software development lifecycle, would you advise to start with ASVS or threat modeling, or both activities in parallel?
So where would I advise to start? I think to a certain extent it depends on the team and the context. I think it's a much wider question. I think that you can. One of the key things from my perspective is to try and make all these activities sustainable. I think if you're working in it as a security person and you're an application security person, you can't be doing this yourself all the time. So the first thing is, well, how is this going to happen once I stop doing this? How can I move this responsibility onto developers and make it something they can do? So I think it's a question of how easily do you think you can make take one of these activities and adapt it in a way that developers can pick up and use it on an ongoing basis. And you'll need to get buy-in from development management in order to do that. But I need to get the developer time to do that. Then you start thinking, well, if I want to start with ASVS, maybe I can provide some sort of way of filtering the view of the ASVS to focus on sort of specific topics or specific areas. So they think, okay, well, if I've got a new feature that I'm building that covers this area, then I can use this tool to get a particular view of ASVS or a particular subset of ASVS, and then I know the requirements I need to take into account when I'm building that feature. So that's one option. Another option is thinking about, well, how can I take threat modeling and make it more accessible? How can I come up with some sort of lightweight method or some sort of staggered method where less risky features have a much more sort of high-level, quick view, and more risky features have a more in-depth view. But in each case, I think it's a question of figuring out what's going to work best with the team, what the team are best going to be able to adopt within themselves, and then how you can adapt the process to facilitate that. I don't necessarily think I'd advise one over the other, but I guess from my perspective, it may be that ASVS can sort of help you earlier on, because ASVS can help you at the requirement stage while you're already thinking about, well, how's the feature going to work? And whilst you're thinking about how's the feature going to work, maybe you're thinking about the security concerns as well. So that might be an advantage of having ASVS first, or having some sort of secure requirements process based around ASVS.
Right, thank you for this answer. And I see a similar line within the chat now. Ellie Rose says, ASVS is requirement stage before any actual work on a feature has begun. You can build some requirements into acceptance criteria in the stories. And of course, that's a good idea. Earlier on, makes it easier to adapt. Threat modeling is design stage when you have a diagram/flow and can brainstorm threats and risks during that. But again, before any implementation. Well, Ali, thank you for your additions to this answer. If there are any more questions, please voice them now. Josh will not be available after the presentation from Björn, but we might be able to relay questions by email. And of course, you have his contact details from the previous slides. So if you have any further questions, feel free to use them.
Yeah, please do feel free to get in touch. I'm sorry I can't stay much longer, but do get in touch and ask questions. We always like to get more input and hear more perspectives.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Josh, in that case, I would like to thank you for your contribution for today, and for the rest of for all of our spectators. We'll have a short break. We're actually 5 minutes ahead of schedule, so the break will be a bit longer. Otherwise, people that join for the second talk might miss the start. So we'll be back at 8:05 with the new with the following topic from Björn Kimminich on the OWASP Juice Shop. Thanks again, and hope that we'll talk to you again in 20 minutes.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the OWASP Netherlands chapter meeting of April 2023. This meeting being virtual, we have another meeting planned already on May. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the OWASP Netherlands chapter meeting of. In May, we usually have our meetings at the third Thursday of the month. In May, that would have been Ascension Day, so we've moved it backwards 1 week. And our next meeting will be on the 25th of May. The topics, as you can see on the screen, are AppSec in IT contracts with Sebastian Afervari and containers and their escapes, understanding escape patterns and possibilities with Mauricio Cano. If you have any specific topics in mind you would like to hear from about, please go to the menti.com poll we have here on the screen. You can easily either scan the QR code or go to www.menti.com and use the code 164865. Of course, if you don't have your phone at hand, you can watch it back. It will be displayed again at the end of the presentation. Our next speaker is Björn Kimminich, and he's going to talk to you about the OWASP Juice Shop. Björn, if you would kindly share your screen.
I will share my screen.
It works. And in that case, Björn,
Lovely.
the floor is yours.
Thank you, and welcome also from my side to this little compressed, let's say, presentation about the OWASP Juice Shop. So I will try to give you an overview of what the project is, and but also focus a bit more on the newer features, so that it's hopefully even interesting for those who already know the Juice Shop and maybe have even played with it some time ago. So yeah, my name is Björn Kimminich. I'm the project lead for the OWASP Juice Shop, and I'm also part of the leadership in the German OWASP chapter, and I'm currently chairing the OWASP project committee as well. So I'm a pretty busy bee in the OWASP world, I would say. So as you see, I actually changed the Juice Shop logo a little bit to for particularly for this event. I will later upload this file into the OWASP swag repository and share the link with the moderators here, so that in case the chapter wants to have some stickers printed at any point in the future, so then you definitely can do that. Okay, so let's start. So in case you have really no time at all today, and you have to run after basically in the next 2 minutes, then this is basically the slide that you want to screenshot, because it gives you the compressed information about what the Juice Shop actually is. So I will go through a bit more details, obviously, during the session, but just to give a rough overview, so the Juice Shop is a vulnerable web application. I still consider it probably still the most modern one, because it's using Angular in the front end, so it's a rich internet application, which is something still not totally popular in many of the other Vuln apps that you find in the wild. And it has quite a few features which go beyond just playing around with cross-site scripting and SQL injection. And so you can use it in capture the flag events. You can use it in enterprise scope security awareness sessions, and you can also use it to play around with your security tools and see what they are actually able to find, especially in, for example, front-end heavy applications. So we will take a little tour at the beginning. So for those who've never seen the Juice Shop, this is actually how it looks like. So when you visit it, you are greeted with a list of lovely products that you can take a look at. So like the melon bike, for example, or you can maybe you're interested in like smoothies because you're really into health. You could also take a look at some reviews that users actually left. And of course, there's some more products hidden here. You also see a lot of merchandise, and most of the merchandise you see here is actually that actually exists. And some of it is even still available. So that's the product overview. Of course, there's some more stuff hidden here in the menu. So for example, there's an About Us page which tells you the really interesting story of the juice shop company. It also gives you all the links to everything that you need these days, from Twitter to even seemingly some NFTs that the juice shop tries to sell. There's a photo wall where customers actually posted interesting pictures with their juice or with their product that they bought in the shop. There's also some broken images here, it seems, so no idea why that happens, but well, that's how it is. You can seemingly even leave feedback anonymously. Well, but what you cannot do anonymously is shopping, right? So in order to actually buy some stuff, we need to get an account. So let's try to log in, and I could now either create a brand new account, or I can, to save some time, just use the demo account that is built into the application, and you will never guess what the password is. So, using the demo account, I'm now finally able to put stuff into my shopping basket. So let's start with a melon bike. I really like that. I also want some of the green smoothies. And maybe also, let's see, what else can I use? Maybe a mug. And maybe I also want the OWASP Snakes and Ladders web applications game that you can use for as a plugin for a popular board game simulator. So what about that? So let's take a look in the shopping basket. So maybe I decided, okay, I really can't afford the melon bike, so maybe I throw that out, but instead I might actually get a few more smoothies. So you can of course do all that. Then you go to the checkout. And because I picked the demo user, it already has everything that we need to complete the purchase, so we don't waste time creating addresses and also payment options and stuff. So, but first choosing how fast do I need my stuff. So I think I'm fine with standard delivery. Payment, I can choose between my credit card that has been completely securely saved in the juice shop database, of course. I can also pay with my in-store wallet. And also there's some other payment options, but those are actually just links to the official juice shop merchandise and a link to donate to the OWASP Foundation, which is always a good idea. So let's pay with our wallet. Okay, I'm satisfied with everything I see. Place your order and pay. And now I have completed my purchase, and I immediately receive a tracking link here on the top. So I can see that I will get my delivery in 5 days. That's the estimation, and it currently is still in the warehouse as you would expect. All right, that sounds good. So the juice shop now, since I'm now logged in, gained a few more features. So for example, I could, which I of course won't do because I don't have anything to complain, but I could raise a complaint, for example, if one of my orders went missing or something went wrong or something arrived broken. I can also start a friendly interaction with the juice shop's chatbot. Maybe let's do that. So, hi, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Juicy. Oh, damn. And I immediately didn't read what the bot said, right? So it asked me for my name and I responded hi. So now it thinks my name is hi. So I can ask it questions. How much is apple juice, for example? And the bot will tell me how much apple juice or lemon juice costs. So, well, but at least it got the question decently right. So about us, that is all still there. I could also become a deluxe member for the juice shop, so I will get better offers and faster delivery for free and all that kind of stuff. Very nice. And here on the top, in the account menu, you also see lots of additional options. So like looking at my order history, there's some privacy and security things. I could even set up two-factor authentication for the juice shop. So that would actually also work. So as you can see, this basically concludes the quick demo of the actual shop part of the application. This is a fully functional web shop, right? So the only thing that it doesn't do, it doesn't end up in you getting the actual goods that you ordered, right? But it also doesn't end up in me getting your money, so that's a fair no-op trade, I would say. But from the functionality point of view, it works. But of course, that's not the main use case of the actual juice shop, right? So the actual use case is to hack it and to try and break it. And that's why the juice shop contains, at the moment, 101 hacking challenges. The 102nd is already available on the staging environment, so it will be one more very soon. And as you can see here in the distribution of categories, juice shop has basically everything that you would expect, right? So it has cross-site scripting in various kinds, sensitive data exposure, input validation problems, broken access control, vulnerable components, and so on and so on. So basically, juice shop covers everything from the OWASP top 10, and not only the current ones, but also the ones from, let's say, almost since the beginning. I would assume. It doesn't have a buffer overflow, I think, but that's about it. Everything else is basically available in the juice shop to actually hack. So the challenges are separated into different difficulty levels, so that basically everyone has something to do. So you can start with the easy 1-star challenges to get a feeling for how the hacking stuff works. Or you can also do the how do you say, nail biter issues where you really have to invest a lot of time and energy to actually get them done, right? So that's why the juice shop is actually pretty popular with, for example, with developers who do the first security trainings that they maybe ever get. But it's also used by seasoned pen testers to play around and try to actually solve some of the really hard stuff. When you successfully solve a challenge, you will be seeing your progress on the scoreboard of the juice shop, which you see a screenshot here. I will also show it a bit later. So the scoreboard has all the information, you can do different filtering and all that stuff, and we will take a look at that live later on. And later on is actually exactly now. So let's quickly jump over to the juice shop. Now the problem is that, I showed you in the screenshot that there is a scoreboard, but there was no link to that scoreboard anywhere where we clicked around, right? So, and even if you look as hard as you want on the UI, you will not find the link to the actual scoreboard. Because it's actually the first hacking challenge that typically people get when they play with the juice shop, find the scoreboard. So there's one link here that we didn't use so far, and that is the help getting started link. And this will actually launch a little tutorial. Let me zoom in a bit. And this will help you to find the actual scoreboard. Unless you already know where it is, then of course you don't need this, right? But this is actually a little bot that will give you some hints and advice on how to actually try and find the scoreboard. So you can speed it up a little bit if it's talking too slow for you. So, and it already tells us, okay, we can either do it via URL guessing, or we can go through the client-side JavaScript code and try to find some useful information. So, and it will even tell us how we get to the development tools to actually do that. So, I will just do it the quick way and do URL guessing, right? So I could, for example, try this URL, and I have a typo in there, so it will of course not work. But even if I don't have a typo, it will still not work, because this is the wrong URL. But if I paid attention to the different URLs I already visited, you might have noticed that different words are actually split by dashes here in the UI. And maybe that's a common thing. So let's see if this is actually working. So score dashboard. And as you see here, we now get confetti, and actually the little bot here on the top is also congratulating us that we found the actual scoreboard. And we can now send it away. So this is the scoreboard when you start off. It will by default only show you the 1-star challenges. Apart from the scoreboard telling you that you solved a hacking challenge, you also get a little notification here on the top that will also tell you. And as you've also seen, there's some confetti being shot when you actually successfully solve a hacking challenge. So yeah, so that's basically it. And we could now start filtering for different things. So for example, I could decide that I'm only interested in injection challenges, but then of course all difficulties. And now it will show me all the different hacking challenges, right? That are about injection topics, right? Or I could say, okay, I want only cross-site scripting, for example, and then you can see there's actually quite a few different cross-site scripting activities, and also across various difficulty levels. Okay, so what you can also do, you can download the progress that you actually made, and you can later restore it if you want. But actually the Juice Shop saves your progress anyway in a cookie. So if you always use the same browser and you have no plugins messing with your cookies, then it should just restore automatically after a restart. So it should remember how many challenges you actually solved. Yeah, so that's basically the scoreboard. Going back to the presentation. So there's one thing that I didn't show. You can launch the Juice Shop in a so-called tutorial mode. And this will basically prevent you from using any of the filters, right? So it will only allow you to see 1-star challenges first, and also only the ones which come with built-in tutorials. So the little tutorial that helped us find the scoreboard itself was not the only tutorial in the Juice Shop. So these little icons here with the little student hat or graduation cap, they actually, when you click these, that triggers another tutorial to help you solve one of the challenges. And several of the easier challenges actually have these kind of tutorials. So it's all about making it accessible for a broader audience, right? And also, if you do it in a self-paced learning style and you don't have an instructor-led training where people guide you through the application. So this is actually quite useful, especially when you are just playing with the Juice Shop alone. Yeah, so assuming that you're running in tutorial mode, if you solve all the 1-star challenges which are presented, it will then unlock the 2-star challenges with tutorials and then the 3-star challenges, and that's basically it, because there is only tutorials available for I think 10 or 11 challenges in total. So once you solved all the tutorial challenges, then the entire scoreboard will unlock, and then you can just use the Juice Shop in your own speed, basically, in the way that you actually like. So behind the scenes, Juice Shop is actually doing some stuff to prevent you from, not prevent, but to actually notice if you are doing something fishy. So we call it anti-cheat or cheat detection. So whenever you solve a hacking challenge, Juice Shop will compare a few things. So it will actually verify what challenge you solved before, how much time you spent in between, and also calculate some other things to rate the currently solved challenge with a cheat score between 0 and 1. So similar to spam scoring. And it will also keep track of your overall cheat score. So this is of course something completely uninteresting for the users themselves. But if you consider JuShop being used in a training setup, then the trainer might actually be monitoring the different cheat scores for the different students or participants, right? So they actually have an idea, although it's not completely precise, but at least they have an idea if someone is just using the existing solutions from the internet and just types them in without actually trying themselves. Because, for example, they are way too fast with solving the challenges. So a relatively new feature still in the JuShop is the so-called coding challenges. And these become available once you actually, I mean, for some of the challenges, they become available after you solve the hacking challenge. And instead of explaining this on a screenshot, I would also like to show you how that works. But in order to do so properly, we should first solve an actual challenge, right? So finding the scoreboard also comes with a coding challenge, but it's not the best example. So let's try to solve one of the hacking challenges here. So favorite examples are always the DOM XSS because there's one very easy way to do that. But today I would like to do something a little bit different. We will try an injection attack. And what is the most obvious place to try injection attacks? Of course, it's the login form, right? Because this is basically the jackpot for every pen tester if you are just able to log in with some account via some simple SQL injection. So, but first, because we want to do this a bit more realistically, so let's play around with the login a little bit. So let's try something. Okay, invalid email or password. I know that the demo user exists, so let's try that with a broken password. Okay, invalid email or password. Well, now then let's try something more nefarious, like a single quote. And I actually get a success notification here, but not for a SQL injection, but actually it seems that I provoked an error that was not properly or consistently handled. And you might notice here on the top, the error message is a little bit obscure, right? So in order to hopefully see what goes on, maybe I should open my DevTools and take a look at the console or the network tab. So let's see what's actually going on here. So let's do that again. And you can see that our login request ran into a 500 error.
Sorry, I'll have to interrupt you for just a couple of
you can
seconds.
see that we have an error in the response.
One. All right, everybody, and sorry for the interruption. I had a bit of a power issue and used the USB-C port for both my output and power at the same time, but apparently didn't work. Now it's back to Björn with the OWASP Juice Shop. Björn, the floor is yours.
Thank you again. So yeah, let's do a quick rewind into the actual challenge that we actually want to solve here. So we want to try and solve an injection challenge, classic SQL injection, by attacking the login screen of the juice shop, right? So let's see if that works. Can you see my screen actually? All right, okay. So yeah, very good. Okay, good. So we try to what we want to do, we want to do a SQL injection attack against the login form in the juice shop here to see if that actually works. We play around a little bit with invalid inputs, so user accounts where we are pretty sure that the email address doesn't exist, or maybe an existing user that we already know of, but with definitely the wrong password, and it behaves like you would expect, right? But we can also try something like sending a single quote character, and the error message that we see looks a little bit weird. And maybe I should have turned on my developer tools and also take a look at the network traffic while I'm doing this, right? So let's try to log in again. And now I notice there's a login request happening and it goes horribly wrong, because it runs into a SQLite error, and SQLite complains about an unrecognized token. So this is a very clear indication that we can actually do some SQL injection here. Actually, the error message is so nice to even completely tell us the whole query syntax, so it should be pretty easy for me to actually fix it now, right? So let's try to first repair the query by essentially commenting out all the rest here after my injected single quote, and let's see what happens. So I still get an error, but now it says invalid email address or password, right? So because what it tries now, it tries to get me an empty username and no password check, but that of course doesn't exist. So I could, for example, now try this, because I know that the demo user exists, and as you can see, I am now properly logged in as, let's check, as the demo user. Cool. So if you remember what the scoreboard said, the scoreboard actually said I should try to log in as different users, right? So for example, I should try to log in as the administrator. So either I could guess now what the administrator's username might be, which is probably not even that hard, or I could do a slightly different trick, which is probably the most popular SQL injection payload ever, and just see if I can log in with, well, hopefully the first user that appears in the database, which might coincidentally also be the administrator, right? Because maybe they have been created first, like often happens, I would say. So let's see. And as you can see, I'm getting confetti and I'm told that I logged in as the admin successfully. Very nice. And it also says so here on the top. And I probably wouldn't have been able to guess this username, right? So good that the or 1 = 1 trick worked. Now, going back to the scoreboard, it will now show us that we successfully solved the login admin challenge here. But what it also did, it unlocked this little button, and the button says launch associated coding challenge. And this is what we want to do now. So the juice shop now loads some actual piece of code from the application itself. So this is not like a fake code snippet that we made up. This is the actual code coming live from the server, basically. And it asks me to actually find the line of code that is responsible for this SQL injection problem, and then I can submit it. So it could be one or more lines, and I can select them here, right? So maybe I'm very confident that this must be the actual problem, right? Must have something to do with security. So let's see. Submit. Seems to be the wrong answer. Well, too bad. So, well, maybe it's, let's see. Maybe it's the error handling that is wrong. Let's try that. Submit it again. It's still the wrong answer, but as you can see, now the juice shop tries to help me a little bit, right? So I get a little hint what I should actually look for. And this would actually continue if I submit even more wrong answers, right? So of course, it should be pretty obvious that the way that the SQL query is assembled here with things coming directly from the request, that this is of course the wrong, the mistake. But just for fun, let me submit a few more wrong answers here so you can actually see that I get a different hint and maybe even a third hint, right? And the hints get more and more explicit. But at some point, the juice shop is basically giving up and is just telling you what the actual answer is, because we don't want people to get completely stuck and frustrated, right? So line 15 is the one responsible for the SQL injection problem. And when I submit it, this is of course correct. I get confetti again, and I'm now in the second phase of the coding challenge, which is called Fix It. So I am now provided with 4 different fix options, and I can view them here, and the juice shop is basically proposing some change to how I might actually fix this issue. So, for example, I can either compare it line by line, like in this case. I can also go for side-by-side comparison if I prefer that. So, depends on what you like. So, here it actually proposes to do some regular expression matching. Okay. Second option, here it proposes to actually do some, it proposes to do some variable binding. Okay, that's good. Maybe that's the right solution, right? I mean, variable binding is, of course, that's always a good idea. So let's submit this. And while, of course, variable binding is a nice thing, but this is not enough, right? So because I didn't read this completely down to the end, because here it still directly uses the password here. So that's not really properly done yet. So let's see. We might actually take a look at the other options, which is always a good idea to look at all options before you submit your answer. So here in this case, it now says, okay, do variable binding for both email and password. And now I don't want to make another mistake, so let's take a look at fix 4 as well. Looks kind of similar, but here it also hashes the password before it's put into the query, which looks like the best option, right? So the third option didn't have that, so that would have been saving the password in clear text or submitting it in the query in clear text. So let's submit this option here, which is correct. Then I get an explanation why this is the right answer. I could, if I wanted to, I could now rate the challenge, and I can close it and then also get it marked here as green, right? And you can see also that you can also do a rating for the different hacking challenges if you like. And this is very simple approach. So there's nothing fancy happening in the juice shop. This will just send you to a Google Doc, a Google form, and you can anonymously just provide some feedback. if you like the challenge, and also give some comment about it. So these are the coding challenges. Switching gears a little bit. So this was basically the Juice Shop, let's say, basic functionality. You can also use Juice Shop in capture the flag events pretty nicely. So if you run it in a specific configuration, the notifications will contain a flag code, which you can then copy, and you can use it in a central CTF server of your choice to actually submit and then get the points on the CTF server. So from the setup, Juice Shop, you can run Juice Shop instances wherever you want. You only need to make sure that the flag codes that your Juice Shop creates are the ones which are known on the CTF score server, right? And this can be done by generating them in a specific way with a specific key that the server also uses. Well, setting this up manually is of course quite a bit of effort, which is why we created a little tool that helps you doing that. And our little tool supports 3 popular servers: CTFD, the Facebook CTF server, and also root the box. And what you can essentially do, you run this little command line tool and you answer a handful of questions here. So for example, for what server you want to generate data for, where the challenges should be retrieved from, the key, if you don't want to use the default. And you can also say if hints and all that kind of stuff should be free or paid or not available at all. And once you answered all these questions, you get a zip file or XML file, depending on the selected server type, generated. And you are then handed some instructions how to import this into the corresponding server. So running this little script here takes you, I don't know, 2-3 minutes maybe, and importing this zip file into CTFD, which is a very popular open source CTF server, is also very, very straightforward and takes you maybe another 5 minutes. And then you have a completely set up CTF with all the Juice Shop challenges inside. And when you start the Juice Shop with the same CTF key as you used to generate these this export for the score server, then the users can actually paste their flag code into the CTF server, and then it will be solved on the score server, and you will get points and whatever. So that is very, very straightforward. Here are some screenshots how this actually looks. So this is from Root the Box. This is the Facebook CTF server, which is for quite some time not developed anymore. So I'm not sure if that's so highly used still. And CTFD screenshots you can see down here. Another, let's say, supporting service around the Juice Shop is the multi-juicer, which is a platform to actually run Juice Shop in bigger training setups, so that not every user needs to launch their own instance. So you can basically provide a central Kubernetes cluster with many Juice Shop instances, one per user or one per team, and you basically get them centrally assigned, and you're also the users are also kind of have sticky sessions to their instance, so they don't interfere with each other's hacking progress. This is a third-party project, which is so it's not part of the official Juice Shop OWASP project itself, but it's very closely related, and the main maintainer of this project is actually also a core team member of the Juice Shop. So the way it works is pretty straightforward. So you have a Kubernetes cluster with the Juice Shop instances, which are dynamically started on demand, and a custom-built load balancer called Juice Balancer, which assigns different teams of people to those instances and makes sure that they are isolated properly. So that's a very, very nice thing. It also looks pretty nice. So when you register with your team, you get a code. So in case you you want to share an instance with a different user, you can just tell them your login code basically, and they can connect also to your same instance. And multi-juicer also comes with a little scoreboard of its own, so it's kind of a lightweight CTF-friendly solution. If you don't need a full-blown CTF server, you can here basically compare the different progress for the different running instances. Another feature of the Juice Shop that now again goes into a little bit of a different direction is the rebranding or the theming that we support. So the screenshots that you see here, this is basically the Juice Shop running in the Kühne Nagel theme, which is the company I work for, and this is basically what I use when I do awareness sessions with especially non-IT people, right? Because it's all nice and fine to actually show people the Juice Shop UI, and I think most nerds and tech-aware people will actually get it and feel fine playing with this. But if you want to explain security issues to someone not so technical, it's better to actually show them something that they know, right? So something that is from their business domain, for example. And then this whole stuff with the comic icons here for the different juices and all those sometimes a little bit snarky humor inside that might not work in all environments properly. So you can basically change it to something different. And let me just quickly relaunch the Juice Shop in a different theme that is coming along with the application, which has been built some years ago by the Mozilla team for an internal training of their own. So if I now refresh the UI, you can see that a lot has changed. The color palette has changed, the icon has changed, the name has changed. The entire product catalog is now different, right? Except for a few things which are still the same. But so now it's all about Mozilla stuff. You can even see if you, for example, go to the support chat, that even the chatbot avatar is now different, right? So, and if you go to the About Us page, now also the links to the social media accounts are different. So you can customize almost everything in the Juice Shop to not completely hide its origin, but to make it feel like a merchandise shop of a different company, right? So let's start it back in default mode again. So yeah, this is a pretty useful feature, especially for security awareness trainings. And in order to do that, all you have to do is provide a custom YAML file where you override all the values that you want to set on your own. So you don't have to fully customize it if you don't like, but the Juice Shop already comes with a handful of themes which do the full-blown configuration. For example, the Mozilla's theme is built in, and it will basically give you a good idea how you can do this. For example, to create a theme for your own company that you work for, or for a customer of yours. And as I mentioned, even the inventory can be changed, and the configuration mechanism is actually quite smart. So either you provide images already in a dedicated folder, or you just give it a URL, and then the application will download that image on startup and place it in the correct folder, and then use it later on from there. So it's pretty convenient, I would say, and pretty powerful. And to be honest, I've never seen this in any other vulnerable web application before. So very briefly about some of the things behind the scenes. So the Juice Shop, I mentioned it already, is an Angular application in the front end. It uses Material Design and Angular Material for its look and feel and user experience. In the back end, we have a Node.js server with the I guess still pretty popular Express framework. We know already from the error message from the SQL injection that there's a SQLite database in the background, which is abstracted away via the SQLize framework and some small other framework that generates REST endpoints automatically, which is of course completely terribly configured. So you will also have some fun hacking the JuShop API actually. And also we have an in-memory database, which is MarsDB, and this is a JavaScript implementation of a MongoDB. So we also have some document database related injection challenges, for example, and those use then MongoDB syntax. So yeah, it's a pretty straightforward and lightweight setup, especially because the SQLite is just a file, and this is in memory. So the entire JuShop runs very nicely in one single Docker container. So you don't need to compose any crazy things with having one container for the database, one for that, one for this. It's just all in one single container. And this makes JuShop very, very simple to run and install, right? To install and run. So of course you can run it locally with Node.js. That's what I'm currently doing. You can run it easily in Docker, or you can wrap it in Vagrant if you prefer that. And we have also instructions on how to get it running on basically every major cloud provider. JuShop is quite nicely translated into many, many different languages. The size of the flag only signals the, let's say, the level of translation completeness. So maybe let me just quickly show this. Going back here and refreshing so we get the default layout back. So let's go back here to the main page and let's log out. And here I can select the intended language which I like. So if I, for example, pick Dutch, you notice that there are some strings already translated, right? But not everything. And if I hit refresh now, it would, if there are translations for backend texts, it would also translate these. And you can see that for some of the products, for example, for banana juice, which seems to be Bananensap, right? So this is now also translated, which is actually pretty nice. And this even goes depending on the language, as mentioned, right? This might even cover the scoreboard. So as you can see here, some, the challenge descriptions here, for example, have also been translated, and these are coming also from the backend. So the little temperature indicator here shows the completeness of the translation, but only for the front end code. So the back end code is in most cases less translated. But in general, Dutch is pretty complete for the front end strings, which are static. Can still use some work for backend texts. And as we use Crowdin, which is the same translation provider that also Zap uses, it's pretty straightforward to use, let's say. So I appreciate every help with actually doing translations for the application. Okay, so this is basically my favorite slide of the whole presentation, the JuShop success pyramid. So JuShop over the time had 95 contributors in total, which is not that bad. It's an OWASP flagship project. It even has a gold medal from the OpenSSF Best Practices project, so which is typically given to really well secured and well maintained open source projects. And I had to convince the people behind it that JuShop has to have some security vulnerabilities, because normally you're of course not supposed to have those, right? So they basically gave me a pass on the fact that JuiceShop has some intentional vulnerabilities, but no unintended ones. JuiceShop is pretty, I would say, well crafted, with a pretty high test coverage, especially for an open source project, I would say. Also, relatively good code quality, I would say, and it's used quite a bit. So we are at almost 8,000 GitHub stars. So I think the real number here at the very bottom is we are missing 22 stars for the actual 8,000. Number of downloads from GitHub from the releases page is closing in on 200,000, but the really crazy number is the number of Docker image pulls, which is almost 80 million by now. And I have no idea why and how in reality people are using this application so much that they need so many fresh images of the JuiceShop. But I won't complain, let's put it like that. So let's see. At some point, maybe I will still see the 100 million being cracked. So if you ask yourself how you could contribute to this lovely project, of course you can help us out in the code base. So the easiest way to do that is go to GitHub and check our backlog of issues. Currently, there are not so many because we are approaching the next Google Summer of Code. And that is typically the time when many of the, let's say, beginner-friendly tickets are gone, because students who propose a project for the Google Summer of Code with us pick up those to actually get a feeling for working on the application. And also you find here the link to the Crowdin project if you want to help with translation, for example. If you need a bit more information on how to get started, especially for the contribution part, we have a very extensive documentation which gives you an overview of the code base and also gives you the complete development contributor guide. And this little ebook here, which you can also read online, has chapters on each and every vulnerability in the application. It has hints for every challenge. It has complete step-by-step solutions for every challenge. So if you're really stuck with one of the challenges and just want to get it done step by step, this is the place you can always fall back to. If you contribute to the JuiceShop for the first time, meaning you get your first pull request merged, I will send you some stickers with the little caveat that I tend to take more time to send those out than I actually want. So if you get a pull request merged, I will ask you on a private channel or via email for your address, and if you give it to me, I will put it in a list, in a backlog basically, and at some point I will go to the post office with a bunch of letters which contain stickers, postcards, and all kinds of other things. And if you successfully participate in a Google Summer of Code or other bigger event, which leads to nice improvements for the JuiceShop, you might even get a t-shirt or a hat or some other of the merchandise that you can also see in the shop itself. Okay, we are almost at the end. Just a little overview of what we currently have on the project roadmap. So the first 4 entries here, this is basically ideas that we as a project team have posted for potential Google Summer of Code projects for this year. So this could be renovating the scoreboard, because if you noticed when I filtered and did some stuff on the scoreboard, this didn't feel really that great, and it also was performance-wise not really perfect. So we actually would like to get some improvements happening here. The ebook that I mentioned, where you find all the documentation and hints and everything, is currently using an out-of-date Gitbook technology stack, and we actually would like to migrate away from that to something more modern, which might also become a Google Summer of Code project. Then we had for some time already ideas about Web3 specific hacking challenges. So doing some crazy stuff with blockchains and and whatnot, smart contracts, and I don't know. So this might also be a cool project for Summer of Code. And another one might actually be to enhance our cheat detection, which is currently pretty simple. So it mostly just compares time between previous and current challenge being solved, and it takes into account a few dependencies. For example, if you remember when I logged in or when I played with the login, and I got this error message, this incorrect handling of error messages challenge solved. This could have also happened at the same time when my successful SQL injection happens, right? And of course, when these two are solved together, that doesn't mean that you cheated, right? It could just be correlated. And these kind of things are already taken into account in our current cheat detection. But of course, this could be improved and be made even more smart. Then there's also a little initiative going on to bring the juice shop challenges into the OpenCRE. So as a dedicated resource, similar to OWASP top 10 entries or cheat sheets or ASVS chapters and all those things. So that basically, if you in the OpenCRE look for example, cross-site scripting, you find available juice shop challenges as an additional resource. Then we also have some sweet Grafana dashboard that's coming with the juice shop, in which you can quite easily set up to monitor your own instance. I didn't show that for time reasons, but we actually want to enhance that as well. Then our test coverage is currently at 88%. I would personally feel much better if it was 90 or more again, but yeah, that's a continuous task, I would say. And of course, the biggest roadmap item of all is to sell our existing NFT collection. And if you ask yourself, do these guys really have an NFT collection? The answer is yes, we definitely have, right? And here you can see the 4 available NFTs, which are actually being sold for really not that much money, or not that much Ethereum actually, on OpenSea, right? So. And actually, one person, I don't know who, it wasn't me, one person actually bought 1 copy of the Juicy Evil Wasp, right? So I don't know what will happen with these. Maybe they will go to the moon, as the crypto guys say, or maybe they will go completely down the drain some point in time. But I can only recommend to get your own official Juice Shop NFT for, I think it's roughly something between 20 and 30 euros, which is what they are selling for. So if you're into such crazy stuff and, let's say, not exactly safe kinds of investment, but with a huge opportunity for nerdiness, this is what you actually want to do. Additional information you can find on the official website, owasp-juice.shop. The source code is all on GitHub. So the main project and the CTF extension and all other code projects we have are all MIT licensed, so very, very friendly license type. The ebook is Creative Commons licensed. So, and all the artwork is available in the OWASP swag repository. And this will also be where I will put the lovely flag, the lovely logo with the Netherlands chapter flag that I showed at the beginning. So that's all I have. Thank you all for your attention, and I'm open for questions if you have any.
All right, Björn. Thank you for your presentation. We're a bit over the timeline, also due to the technical error halfway. But I think we're exceptionally clear on the object, because there are no questions in the chat just yet.
I have no questions. I will just assume that everything you might be interested in has been covered.
That might actually be the case.
Or maybe even more than you've been interested in.
You'll never know. Okay, thank you everyone for the presentation, for joining our presentations on the OWASP GeoJob and the Application Security Verification Standard. Again, our next presentations will be physically in Delft. It will be in May. Oh, and I see some reactions dropping in.
Okay,
Indeed, no
I'm
questions
seeing in
here,
the chat that
but a great presentation. Thanks.
Ellie never used GeoJob before, but now definitely will. So that's all I want to achieve with these kinds of presentations.
Yeah.
And sell NFTs, but hey, you can't have everything, right?
That's, yeah, can't have it all. But either way, so thank you again for your presentation. And we hope to see everyone of you in Delft in a couple of weeks, on 25th of May. For updates, please keep track of our website, owasp.nl. Of course, we also have a LinkedIn page, Twitter, and perhaps a bunch of other accounts. Oh, and don't forget, if you want a specific topic to be discussed, join us and enter your ideas in the Menti poll, which is now available again. Is a link in the chat. Thank you all and have a good day.